cover. And so we're going to do that. And so tonight's topic is actually going to be the top killer on the planet. And by the way, this is according to the World Health Organization, and that would be malnutrition. Next week, we're going to talk about toxins, which they say is number 2. And believe it or not, stress doesn't hit their top 3, but I actually think it's number 1. So we'll look at that next week and the week after, and we will begin to share strategies as to how we can get our best life. So, there we go. Little background on me. I have been in clinical practice now almost 30 years, have treated world champions from every major professional sport, really like working with high-end athletes, but I've also worked at the other end. I've seen people that have been sent home to die, and very thankfully, many of them are still alive 20, 25, almost 30 years later, and thriving. I've also lectured all over the world and over 10,000 hours of continuing education seminars to doctors. So you'll be seeing data as we go through and a lot of medical studies, but if you have a question, type it in the chat because we want this to be interactive. And any question you want, right? It's all fair game. And I already had one question in advance that I'll answer. But if we go back not too far in our history, at one point there was a question, can I eat? Will I eat today? Will I be able to find food? And now it's so abundant that people are starting to ask the question, what can I eat? And reality is there are fewer and fewer really good choices. So we go back to our beginning and we realize that human nutritional needs have not changed much at all. However, the food supply certainly has. And as this picture shows, it's basically led to a de-evolution of humankind and wellness. So this is a 2020 Global Nutrition Report. And quite simply, malnutrition is the leading cause of death. Now, we have better science, we have better farming, we have better everything, and we certainly have way more food, but why would it be that we have so much malnutrition? Well, the Global Nutrition Report says this: there are fewer and fewer places in the world where people are actually not able to get food. And that's wonderful. We don't want anybody to go to bed hungry, but there are a lot of people that are absolutely starving for good nutrition. So what happens is if you eat food that doesn't have in it what you need, you're always hungry. And think about people that you know that are always hungry, always hungry, always hungry, even though they've stored months to maybe even years of extra energy in the form of fat. So our government decided they wanted to publish some dietary guidelines, and you'll find out very simply that that was an absolute disaster. And they said they wanted to update the guidelines every 5 years. Now, if you look at the rate of medical knowledge, not health knowledge, not physiology knowledge, but medical knowledge, it's now estimated to be doubling every 73 days. So here's the bad news for doctors that graduate tomorrow. Their medical education is completely antiquated after 5 half-lives. How long is that? That's a year. So what's going on? Well, medicine may not be the answer, and that's probably a good news for health because we've come to realize that. So this was the first food pyramid, and it was created more or less by a food lobby. And I co-lecture with Barry Sears in Orlando, Florida around the year 2000 after he wrote his book, The Zone. And he put a picture of the USDA food pyramid up on the screen. And he said, if ever there was a terrorist-like plot designed to destroy the health of the world, this would be it. And especially with these 9 to 11 servings of processed carbohydrates and genetically modified gluten. And, we kind of realized that we did not grow up eating grains. That happened a lot later in human history. Well, then they moved a little forward and they created My Pyramid, and then they ultimately created My Plate. And maybe they've gotten better, but they're still missing it. So what we know now, and I often quote this reference, they took age-matched, health-matched people, and they gave them all a very good, healthy, macronutrient balanced diet. They also gave the other group the same diet and supplements. Well, they took tissue biopsies before the study, and they measured the level of nutrition in the tissue, and then after the study. And here's what they found. Even though they had the best diet, their nutrition value of their tissue did not improve at all. So the conclusion was simply food is too weak to replete depleted cells and bodies. Therefore, supplementation is advisable for everyone. So I created a life pyramid and a food pyramid right there in Orlando, Florida. And they've been very much the same over the last 20 years. So what's the basis of my nutrition pyramid? Food, nature's food. Then we go to superfoods, then we go to functional foods. Then you're going to supplement with a multivitamin, omega-3s, preferably activated omega-3s, probiotics, and then the combination of D3, K2. And now you've got what it takes to be healthy. So people often do nutrition consults with me. You know what? It really doesn't matter what you're coming in with. We're going to make sure we cover these bases. Now, there are certain nutrients that we supplement with that are very, very helpful to change chemistry fast, but we want to make sure that we cover our bases. One of my favorite nutrition quotes of all time, Jack LaLanne said, "If God made it, it's okay. If man made it, throw it away." Michael Pollan in his book In Defense of Food said, "Eat food, not too much, mostly plants." And he had a pretty good summary there, but I'm going to tweak that. So eat real, clean food, not too much, not too often, every color, every day, in a way that honors your physiology and your body goals, and mostly plants. So Michael Pollan in his book talked about how in the 1980s, something strange started happening in supermarkets. He said foods started disappearing and they were replaced by food-like substances. So, if you were to look and see what cheese was made of, you might find a little bit of that in here and then 35 other chemicals that you can't even pronounce. That is not food, and we should not be eating that. What about clean food? Well, there's been plenty of documentaries now on factory farming. What we know is that it's abusive to animals. I can't support that in any way. The animals are so sick that they're on a constant dose of drugs. They're fed food that's designed to fatten them up fast. And here's what I tell people: if you eat food that ate a diet to fatten them up fast, what will likely happen to you? Well, the answer is the same. You will get fat fast. So how can we eat clean food, and especially clean meats? Well, clean food, we could get rid of the herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, but understand that when we start talking about clean meats, it takes a lot to get a pound of meat. In fact, about 20-to-1 calorie exchange, 20-to-1 in food, and then we talk about water and space and all these other things. So there's a race to come up with basically genetic hamburgers. Now, when I first heard this study, I was, frustrated to hear it. I thought, oh my gosh, someone's trying to outdo God, someone's trying to outdo nature. But then I looked at the science and I came to realize that you can take a stem cell from a cow, and that's God made that. You can put it in a different growth medium and you can grow the exact same protein. Now, this first burger that was created in 2012, it cost $300,000 to create it. My last check, they were down to $12 a burger. And by the way, when they get down to $1 a burger, now we've got a global market. Plant-based burgers are getting better and better, and they're certainly cleaner. What I tell people is that we are at the top of the food chain. That's the good news in terms of concentrating nutrients. And we do that to a factor, some references say up to 10,000. We concentrate the nutrients by 10,000, but we also concentrate the toxins. So plants are much, much, much cleaner than animals, even though they have herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, but we can stay away from that by eating organic. And then we've begun to realize that these toxins, like these pesticides, are actually linked now directly to autism. And they actually genetically modify plants so that they can handle more of these toxins without killing the plant. This was a huge study that came out in 2018, and they realized that there are 3 very serious aggravators of autism. That would be the drug Tylenol, which, by the way, they recommended after vaccines; Augmentin, which is an antibiotic, which they give too often, even for viral issues; and then the herbicide glyphosate, which is also known as Roundup, and that was an autism accelerator. As we fast forward, we now know that there are traces of Roundup in vaccines. So literally they're injecting this autism accelerator into kids and then giving them Tylenol, another autism problem. So I'm going to encourage everybody to look into that because this is an extreme pandemic. I like to tell people that the brain is the most nutrient dependent, energy dependent, stress vulnerable, and toxin vulnerable organ. We want to get at the nutrients and not the toxins through our food source. And when we look at toxins, what can they do for us? Well, the Clinical Journal of Clinical Chemistry says they can produce fatigue, sleep disturbance, intestinal distress, allergy symptoms, headaches, confusion, and anxiety. But how about skin eruptions? How about weight gain? And then certainly they can cause inflammation and fatigue. And the World Health Organization says that toxins are responsible for 25% of all deaths. That's number 2 on the list. So what about not too much food, not too often? This quote goes back over 100 years now. And here's what it said. Most people are digging their graves with their teeth. Think about how more true that is today. So when you look at weight, and obesity, it is the top risk factor for most conditions, including being the number 2 risk factor for cancer, second only to cigarette smoking. And by the way, body fat does a lot of things unfavorable to your system. This is a story from a seminar I was teaching. I would teach, and after a period of time, I would stop and I'd say, okay, what are your top 3 lessons from this last hour? I want you to write them down and share one with a friend. And then we go around the room and I'd ask people, what was your lesson? What was your lesson? And a guy in the back of the room raised his hand. He says, well, I just realized that I'm 2 feet too short. And what he realized for how tall or how much he weighed, he should be 2 feet taller. Well, I was really proud of him because the next time I saw him, he had lost 50 pounds. And then I saw him a year after that and he had lost 100 pounds. And he said, Bob, I realized there's no way I could promote health walking around morbidly obese. So what about not too much, not too often? This Nobel Prize winner in 2016, I'll try his name, Yoshinori Oshumi. Well, someone that speaks Japanese will maybe correct me on that afterwards or help me with that. But this guy realized that, even though bodies create proteins, it's equally as important to break down those proteins and cycle them and not let them get out of control. What's abnormal cell growth? Well, it's a tumor and it can be malignant or benign, but we certainly don't want that. So he discovered a process called autophagy. And what does that mean? It literally means to eat yourself, to eat your own tissue and to recycle it. And look at what they found out are ways to activate autophagy. You can fast, that's eat food not too much, not too often. Exercise, move your body, right? How about coffee? Yeah, believe it or not, coffee can be really, really good for you. There are certain supplements that do it. Later on, I'll mention that we actually put autophagy supplements into coffee. And then there's a keto diet. So why the keto diet? Why is it all the rage? We know that spiking people's blood sugar is really bad for their health. So we showed our food pyramid and there's foods and then superfoods. Ganoderma lucidum considered by most authorities to be the top superfood. 23 different medical studies on how it activates this process of autophagy, which means it actually helps Parkinson's, helps the brain, and helps energy throughout the entire body. Pretty powerful there. And what do we benefit from when we stimulate this process? Well, we age healthier. We have better metabolic health, which means it's easier to maintain ideal weight. Our brain stays younger and smarter. We prevent cancer. Oh, and it's good for the heart too. And by the way, what are the top causes of death? Well, I hate to tell you, aging, probably, right? But when they put a medical certificate on it, heart disease, number 1, cancer, number 2, obesity is a risk factor for all. And if you get to be 85 years old in this country, there's a 50-50 chance your brain doesn't work anymore. 5,600 studies going back to 1946 on the benefits of calorie restriction, and over 120,000 studies on intermittent fasting. So I'm a big fan of intermittent fasting and calorie restriction. So how do we do it? How do we make it easy? Well, pretty simple. Start eating later in the day and quit eating earlier. So, could you go till noon without eating? Well, I bet you can. And if you can't, well, then we need to improve your metabolic flexibility, your metabolic efficiency. I always use the statement, little old lady, little old man, when I teach about obesity, because nearly everybody has heard the phrase, little old lady, little old man, but we don't hear the phrase, big old lady, big old man. Why? Because big people don't get to be old, or if they do, they've spent their final decade with a major medical disability. So staying small is great for the brain and the body and longevity. What about every color? Here's a medical study that shows that the more varied the diet, the more colors, the lower the risk of cognitive decline. But we also know that varieties of fruits and vegetables are very protective against cancer. Einstein talked about compounding as the eighth wonder of the world. Remember, it's not something you do once in a while that makes the biggest difference. It's what you do consistently. So Darren Hardy, in his book, The Compound Effect, talked about three friends, who had met at a class reunion. And basically, one friend decided to, take up diet and exercise and get back to his, playing weight when he was a competitive athlete. Another guy took a cooking class and a wine tasting class, and the other person kind of stayed on the same path. But, when you make good choices consistently, your body will appreciate that. If you make bad choices consistently, your body will penalize you for that. I love this quote from Sachin Patel: consistency carves canyons, and it will carve out your future. So I use this picture. It's a picture of Gwyneth Paltrow and Gwyneth Paltrow in a fat suit. And this was after the movie Shallow Hal. And I thought, okay, how does that happen? Well, literally, if you have 6 intense minutes of exercise every single day for 20 years, you will lose or not gain 100 pounds. If you have one extra piece of bread every day for 10 years or 20 years, you'll gain 100 pounds. Now, if you don't exercise and eat bread, then you'll do that in 10 years. What if you eat less and exercise more? You can lose 100 pounds much faster. How do we honor our physiology? Well, what are we trying to do with our physiology? I like to say that we should eat like our ancestors ate and understand that every person is different every day. So a day where you've done intense physical exercise, you need more protein, more anti-inflammatory nutrients. A day that you're thinking more, you need more brain nutrients. A day maybe we're feeling run down, you need more immune nutrients. And literally every day is different. I have taught sports nutrition all over the world, and you will definitely nourish the CrossFit athlete different than the power athlete, different than the endurance athlete. This person needs oxygen and aerobic capacity. This person just needs brute raw strength and at most 6 seconds of burst energy. And the CrossFit athlete is kind of a hybrid. They need some endurance. They certainly need some strength. And then they need anaerobic glycolysis as well. What about mostly plants? Well, I use this quote, even though this is now a 25-year-old quote, very powerful one from the Journal of the American Medical Association. At every step along the road to malignancy, plant nutrients tend to reduce the likelihood of transmission to the next stage. There are at least 11 steps in the cancer process. And what we know is every step along the way can be stopped or even reversed with plant nutrients. So there it is. How do we maximize nutrition? You want to eat real clean food, not too much, not too often, every color, every day, in a way that honors your physiology, your body goals, and mostly plants. So we talked about foods. Now we'll talk about superfoods. This website, superfoodevolution.com, lists the top 10 superfoods. Reishi, also known as Ganoderma, also known as Lingqi, the consensus #1. And I like functional foods next. And this is a category of food that's been around for a few decades now. But this is a food that is proven to enhance benefits beyond that of just normal foods. And it has enough nutrition supplemented to make a difference. There are over 80,000 studies on functional beverages, and amazingly, over 3,000 of those on coffee as a functional beverage. The world functional beverage market is about $2 billion a year. So guess what? I like functional coffee as a beverage, coffee with Ganoderma. So we're going to transition to questions and answers, but a lot of people ask me about allergies. And what I tell people is that our immune system should be balanced. I have the PubMed studies here for people that want to screenshot it, but these are consensus, universal, balancing immune-related products. So vitamin D, it can be good for allergy, autoimmunity, infection, and yeah, cancer. Same with DHEA, same with Ganoderma, and same with Periloseed. So all four of these are my favorite ways to ultimately change the immune balance where someone is not prone to having allergy. Specifically Ganoderma and allergy, 32 different PubMed studies. Here's one that shows that it modulates the airway inflammatory process, allergies, and asthma. This woman was highly allergic to bees, got stung in the face 5 times. Dr. Justin Wolven happened to give her a hot chocolate with Ganoderma, and guess what? Breathing relaxed, swelling went down in a matter of minutes. And Fire Captain Brian Figuera on a plane flight was asked, a patient was approaching anaphylaxis on the plane, and they asked, do you have anything? He gave the woman a Ganoderma coffee, and guess what? She started breathing easily, and they did not have to have an emergency landing. So with that, Carol, I will ask you, do we have any questions that have come up in the chat?
We certainly do. Are there any studies on Ganoderma and ADD?
That is a fabulous question. And the last time I checked, not by that name, but there are literally dozens of studies on Ganoderma and brain health. So when we talk about Ganoderma and brain health, it improves brain circulation, it improves brain energy, it improves 4 major neurotransmitters, including the neurotransmitter of focus, which is called dopamine. And I like to tell a fun story. I had a young golfer, and this is the one guy I didn't get a video testimonial that I wish I had, but he had extreme concentration difficulties. And so I basically gave him a Ganoderma coffee. And within the office, he says, oh my gosh, my focus is so much better. You know, I asked him, I said, okay, when is your next tournament? And it happened to be that coming weekend. I said, okay, here's what I want you to do. Drink a Ganoderma, you like the latte, drink a latte before your first tee, and then drink it after the 9th tee. And I said, you know, do that each day, each round. I said, and I predict you'll have your best tournament ever. And, you know, he kind of chuckled. Well, he came back the following week, and he was a very cocky young man. When he was sitting in the waiting area, I asked him, I said, well, how'd you do? And he kind of smirked. He said, well, I didn't have my best tournament ever. I said, okay, fair enough. How'd you do? He said, I won by 15 strokes.
Wow.
I said, okay, how is it possible, you know, that you won by 15 strokes and didn't have your best tournament? He says, well, we had 50-mile-an-hour winds, so nobody scored well. But he said, I was putting unbelievably well. So there's many real life cases where we know that Ganoderma improves focus, but I haven't seen the ADD study yet.
Okay. Karen Wheeler has a great long question or two in the chat for you. Can you see that one there?
I do. She says, I know processed food is really bad, but I also wonder about plants and fruits. They are altered by so much, making them sweeter and sweeter over the years. Okay, well, let's start with that. So, you know, if they are genetically modifying the plants to increase the sweetness, that's not a good thing. Now, they can actually do some hybrids, which they do, and you might call that genetic modification. And why do they make it sweet? Because the number one reason that people put anything in their body is they want it to taste good. So what I tell people is I always want to check the body's response. Now, there's a lot of different ways to do it. I'm actually going to measure blood sugar. I'm going to do a finger prick, then I'm going to have the person eat whatever they want to eat, and I want to see what it does to their blood sugar. Now, understand that under different circumstances, your body needs different things. So I've told people for years, we should all earn our carbs. So remember the autophagy activator being a keto diet. Well, if you don't eat starches or sugars, you basically are eating a ketogenic diet, and that is proven to enhance brain health and longevity. But if you have trained hard, then your body actually benefits from some sugar, and certainly a natural sugar. So I always tell people you should earn your carbs. When I teach sports nutrition, I talk about nutrient timing. And if you spike the blood sugar after a hard workout, you'll raise insulin. Insulin drives nutrients into the cells and will enhance recovery and will enhance muscle growth for people that are interested in that. Next question is, what about nutrients in soils? It's a proven fact that the global quality of soil is dramatically reduced. In fact, it's said in the last 60 years, we've gone from 60 inches of topsoil down to 6 inches. The US Department of Agriculture posted that it takes 1,000 years to grow 1 inch of topsoil. But now we know that there are some really magic plants that convert rock into really good soil. And Ganoderma is one of those. Mushrooms across the board do that well. Then she said, I don't think the nutrition is there anymore. You're right. Should we be limiting our fruits and vegetables because of added sugar? Well, no added sugar for sure, but you need to know what the fruits and vegetables are doing to your body, and then feed it in a way that honors your body.
She also asked, what is good blood sugar increase after you eat?
Depends on what units, right? So in the States, I would say 25 to 30 points, which in Canada, that would be about a 0.3 to 0.4 rise in blood sugar. You all use a different scale for sugar and even cholesterol than we do.
Okay. Another question that we have. Any insight on Ganoderma and increased healing rate of skin tissue?
Yeah, there is. There's actually some studies on Ganoderma post-surgery, and it's shown to dramatically increase the healing efficacy and shorten the healing time.
That is amazing. Now we need a few more questions, my friends. Do we have anybody who wants to type them in? Usually when I ask, they have to think about it, and then we get a few questions. But so far, they're pretty quiet tonight.
Well, it's an interesting time of year in life, and it's fascinating. I've had so many conversations about people, or with people, sorry, and so many people are concerned about the immune system. And if I go back to my immune balancing slide, I've been a little surprised that more people haven't stood up and said, this is what we need to be talking about. So, why do people have a lot of immune dysfunction? Well, we know the number one enemy of the immune system is stress. Over 50 years of published data shows that stress is immunosuppressive. We also know that insulin or blood sugar problems also slows down the immune system. So what I tell people is that sugar usually feeds infections, feeds cancer, and slows immune activity. So if you think about sugar and think about the diabetic who ultimately ends up losing limbs due to gangrene, part of that is because the immune system is very, very compromised, and so is the circulation. There was an article that was entitled The Deadly Quartet, and this was published in 1989. And they said if you had a big belly, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and pre-diabetes or diabetes, you were going to die early. After I read that, I published my own deadly quartet, and that would be stress, toxins, malnutrition, and physical inactivity. And those are the top killers today. Make no mistake about it. Someone published and asked the question about a coronary artery calcium score. That's what CAC stands for. So the question is, after heart surgery, is it possible? Sure. So this is just basically a CAT scan. I had one done years ago. And so what I tell people is, my great-grandfather died at 37 of a heart attack. My grandfather died at 49 of a heart attack. My father, at age 49, had a quadruple bypass. And when he turned 50, he was the oldest living male in the family tree. Well, I think, who knows, I was 40 something when I had that coronary artery scan, and my score was a perfect 0. So the question is, did I have great genes? And I'll tell people, we all have great genes. If we weren't born with a genetic disease, we've got great genes. But do we treat our genes great? And most people don't. So I became a nutrition advocate in my teens, and have been for the last 40 years. So I can tell you it makes a difference. Anything else, my beautiful friend?
No, so far this evening, I don't think anybody has a lot of questions right now. So if you guys do have questions, you can definitely message Dr. Bob or myself and we'll be ready for you. Oh, I've got one more coming in now.
Yep.
Jennifer has got a little question for you here in the chat.
I do see it. So she says, a friend is on Plavix and aspirin after heart stent surgery. Now got bloated, gassy, cannot eat much, cannot eat dinner. How can we help with OG products? Which one and how often? Well, when we start talking about using Ganoderma, the first thing I like to tell people is that it's known to prevent abnormal clotting without promoting abnormal bleeding. A lot of times, especially after surgery, they put people on Plavix. And depending on what kind of stent they put on, they recommend these things sometimes for life, which can be very, very frustrating. But there's a number that these people can measure in their blood. It's called the abbreviation is PTRNI, prothrombin time with international normalized ratio. And that tells the rate at which the blood is clotting. And what you want to do is get a baseline and then add organo products and make sure that this person is not at risk for too much bleeding. And what I can tell you is 1 in 11 people that take a blood thinner have a major bleeding episode. And the extreme side effect of that can be death. So I like the capsules to seal and soothe the gut. When you start talking about gas and bloating, there's a lot of potential challenges. So post-surgery, I can tell you, having worked in the hospital, having studied in the hospital, having been in the hospital, they give nearly everybody post-surgery an acid blocker, and they give them antibiotics. And what does that do? That messes up the gut. And so probiotics can help. Ganoderma has prebiotics, so it feeds good bacteria. It also kills off the bad, but you might want to go with some probiotics as well. And I'm a big fan of digestive enzymes for people that are having food problems. I also, by the way, have people eat one food per meal. We call monomeals because that is easiest on the digestive system, right? So, if you just eat, for instance, broccoli, well, you'll find out if you can digest that, if you can't take an enzyme, and then maybe try some gentle meat like a piece of fish, etc. And after you start building your digestive system back, then you have a lot more freedom to combine foods. But with that said, one of my great mentors said this. He said, you know what, I'll be able to look at you 10 years from now and tell you if you've been combining your foods properly. It makes that much a difference on your physical aging. And the way that you combine foods is vegetables can be eaten with starches. Vegetables can be eaten with meat. Fruits should always be eaten alone. Do not combine proteins and starches. And that was put in a book called Fit for Life. So Karen Timer said digestive enzymes with ox bile. They remove gallbladders so often. And it's really a crime against humanity that we've created an environment where they destroy so many gallbladders. But I literally had a meeting with a gastroenterologist, and I asked him. I said, typical question when I meet with someone. I said, so how can I add value to your life and world? And he said, well, you could find a way to give people 2 gallbladders. And I looked at him kind of funny. I said, why? He said, well, that way I could do 2 surgeries instead of 1. And he was, yanking out gallbladders every single week, multiple times a week. And there are something called the 4 F's of gallbladder, and they're not very flattering, but it's they've added a 5th F, the 5 F's, the fat, 40, fertile, flatulent female are all ones that have gallbladder problems. So what's the fat? That increases estrogen. What's 40? You've had estrogen for too long. What's fertile? You've got too much estrogen. What's female? You've got more estrogen. And what's flatulent? Well, you're not digesting fats, so you're gassy. But now with that said, ox bile, right, can help the gallbladder, but you want to be a good methylator. You want to be kind to your gallbladder. You can do gallbladder flushes. Those are easy to do. I also see, can you take Ganoderma up to surgery date and after? And so here's the funny thing. Most doctors are telling people stop all nutrition, like a couple weeks before surgery. I've had multiple shoulder surgeries. I've taken nutrition up to the, midnight before when I have to fast, and starting immediately after. And when I go back to the surgeon, they go, my gosh, you're weeks ahead of healing, and we're talking about 1 week in. What's crazy is they don't think that that's a duplicatable strategy, but I promise you it is. Can Ganoderma help with kidney? Yeah, absolutely. We've got testimonials of kidney stones. Ganoderma is good for immune regulation, autoimmunity. We've seen literally autoimmune kidney completely and totally resolve. There's another herb I like for kidney stones called gravel root that works very well. That was always my go-to for Ganoderma for kidney stones. But there you go. I see that Jeff has asked, how much is reasonable to spend on a good vitamin package? Well, Jeff, you get what you pay for. And so the ultimate answer for that is, who are we providing the package for? And so when you consider how different people are and how different needs they are, someone who's optimally healthy and has a supreme diet needs to spend a lot less on supplementation than someone who is, really pushing their body to the limit. They need a lot of supplementation for recovery, or someone who's trying to get their health back. I like to tell people it's easier to stay out of trouble than get out of trouble.
Jennifer has another question for us. For an on-off edema leg patient on calcium blocker, is there anything that the Ganoderma can help with?
Well, Ganoderma is really good for circulation first and foremost. And when you start looking at leg edema, you got to wonder, is it kidneys? Is it the heart? And Ganoderma is actually good for both of those. But when you start talking about a calcium channel blocker, nature's natural calcium channel blocker is magnesium. And magnesium is the central molecule in chlorophyll, which is the lifeblood of plants. So if they get more greens, that's my favorite way to get magnesium. They may choose to use a magnesium supplement. There's certainly magnesium in Ganoderma, but if you need more, and a lot of people need more magnesium, then you might want to supplement it. And then there's different forms, right? So with the heart, magnesium taurate, there's taurine in it that can prevent arrhythmia. That's a really good thing.
Okay. So Kat is asking, here we go. What products can you recommend to customers whose wife is showing early signs of dementia, but refuses to get tested?
So we'll probably do another brain series, but maybe it was 7 years ago, I co-lectured with the Dr. Dale Bredesen at a major conference, and he was in the process of writing his book, The End of Alzheimer's. And they literally have thousands of cases now of Alzheimer's that they have completely and totally reversed. And what I tell people is, when you have a problem with any organ system in your body, I don't care if it's your liver, your kidneys, your brain, whatever, there are 3 distinct zones of nerve cells. There's nerve cells that are dead. There's nothing we can do about that. There's nerve cells that are fine. There's nothing we need to do about that. But in between are cells that are functional but not functioning. And guess what? If we can improve function, we can get function back. So the major factors in Alzheimer's were toxicity, inflammatory process, insulin resistance, and overall decline of growth factors. And they've identified so far 36 total risk factors, but they all fall into that category. So now for the very specific question, Ganoderma is really, really good for the brain, but they may need more than that. So there's an herb which is called huperzine, and that is, I think, now in stage 3 clinical trial for dementia, because it's very good at enhancing acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter of memory. So Ganoderma spores, huperzine, and overall good lifestyle support, that would be good.
Okay, and to end it for this evening, we have a question on what is a good source of water. She says, I know that there are toxins in water, tap water and bottled water. What is the best source so that we use the best water for our coffees and drinking?
Well, you can certainly buy really good bottled sources, right? And you want to look at GMP, and Fiji's pretty popular, and there's a couple others like that. But I like to clean all of my water that comes into my house with a whole house filter. And I bought this probably 25 years ago. The company that I bought it from, and I'll bridge to answer your question very specifically. The company was called General Ionics. In fact, it was 28 years ago. I remember 27 years ago, because Jacob was just born. But General Ionics put the water purification system on the space shuttle. And so they're very good at cleaning water. They were later bought out by Culligan. And I'd like to think that Culligan kept all the technology, right, to keep the water clean. But then below the tap, for things that you're going to drink, reverse osmosis, submicron charcoal filter is a very, very good way to go. And then ultimately, you want to test the water that comes out and make sure that it's clean. And I think that wraps it up. Am I correct?
Yes, that would be it for this evening.
Okay.
We do have a few friends who have said they do have some testimonials, but they also have them mentioned in our Miracle of Organo chat, so people can go and check in that chat for them.
Yep. And so, by the way, if you are not in the Miracle of Organo group, whoever invited you to this Zoom should be able to get you in there. And that's really the way I like to do it. So there are actually several in that group. One of my favorites is there was a woman who was in an assisted living center. She had already lost one leg due to diabetes. The other leg had a wound that wasn't healing. And the doctor said, look, if that doesn't heal, we'll have to amputate. They started Ganoderma for the purpose of wound healing. And within 3 months, the wound healed much faster than that. But the doctors had said that both her diabetes was in remission and her dementia was in remission. So, there's so many good things that we can do. It's just a matter of going after it and doing it. And so there's another quote that I like, the program is only as good as the compliance. So the value of functional foods, having nutrients infused in coffee and tea is that, people do it every single day. They never need to be reminded. And then they get the nutrient benefit. So with that said, tomorrow, for people that are interested in learning more or how they can potentially partner with us, we have that in our typical team business meeting. So that'll be 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then we actually have a training and a mastermind after that. I realized last week I scheduled a consult after that, so I didn't do the mastermind, but we've got lots of good stuff to go over in the mastermind with that. I learned from Rod Norville that if everybody wants, they can turn on their cameras and wave goodnight and say goodnight, or whatever you want to do. But I see a lot of beautiful faces and wonderful people. So thank you all for making the world better. And I'll wrap up like I like to wrap up. I'm Dr. Bob Rakowski, absolutely knowing that we can all be happy, healthy, and successful. So good night all. And God bless.
Good night, Dr. Bob. Thank you.
You're the best.
Bye.
Thank you, Dr.
See you
Bob.
tomorrow.
Great information always.
Night,
Good
everyone.
See you tomorrow night. Good night.
Good night.